Chad, you're interesting because you are somebody that's coming from the investment world into the operator world.
Thanks for having me on the pod.
Grüns is killing it right now.
The biggest unlock for me was like, why hasn't somebody put this in a gummy?
Yeah, I remember the first time I got your product being like, this is different.
And so I started thinking about like, how do I take comprehensive nutrition and put it in a format or some habit that people will look forward to and enjoy?
A lot of people that want to start a business, they haven't seen what you've seen. So when I see how successful Grüns is, I'm just like, well, of course, like this seems totally natural to me.
Sometimes even the specific skill set is not as important as just like a willingness to try something. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Operators Podcast. This is going to be a great episode. You're in for a treat. You're getting to hear from Chad Janis, who is the founder and CEO of Grüns, a company that is absolutely blowing up. There's a lot of great nuggets in this episode. But before we get started, want to say thank you to our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Fulfil, Northbeam, Saras, Richpanel, and Postscript. They're the ones who make this pod possible. And without further ado, on to the show. Hey guys, this is an ad for Fulfil, one of the partners of the pod, and you're going to get to hear from one of the best operators, Chad Janis, talking about his experience implementing Fulfil with Grüns. So Chad, you mentioned that like scaling operations has been a huge part of your success. How have you scaled? What partners, softwares have you used? Fulfil's a partner of the pod, I think, that you use. Tell me a little bit about your experience scaling with them.
Yeah, it's probably about 6 to 8 months ago, we realized that we needed a ERP. We built the business off of like Google Sheets and primarily like Google Sheets. And then we had some like internal engineered solutions that were helping us out. And we were deciding between NetSuite and Fulfil. And frankly, when I was an investor at Summit Partners, we had encouraged, I don't think we were aware of Fulfil at the time. I mean, this is back in 2021, 2020. And so all of the brands that we ended up investing in, we would tell them like, hey, we're going to onboard a NetSuite. And it would take a year. We had a person at our investment firm whose job was ERP implementation. Like literally he would spend a year with the brands, helping them with ERP implementation. And it was a slog. And we'd always come to the end a year later after we invested in this business. And they'd pop up and be like, okay, it's mostly done correctly. Here are some things. But literally all this guy did was helping brands with ERP implementation. And, we're growing so fast that wasn't an option for us. Like, I don't know what we're doing in a year. I can't take a year to put an ERP into our systems. And so we were chatting with the Fulfil team. We onboarded with them. I think it took less than 2 months. So speed was highly critical here. Our COO sat down with them. He spent most of the time onboarding and going through that process and felt really compelled with our ability to do it. And it was a precursor for us to be able to do some of our own fulfillment. So historically, we've used 3PLs. We now do a lot of our fulfillment in-house. So absolutely critical part of our system. As I mentioned in the pod, we also do production in-house now, part of our manufacturing process. And so Fulfil is critical for all of that. Every system has like little things here and there, but the speed at which the Fulfil team, when we have an issue, pops in and solves it, I can guarantee you're not getting that from another solution. So they've been great partners, critical to our growth, and will continue to be critical to our growth into the future.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Great partners help you go fast, and they help you open up capabilities that make your business more valuable. We're pretty free flowing here. There's a lot of room to breathe. And I guess I'll just kind of kick us off with the way that this interview started. We're with Chad Janis today. And the way that it started, at least my introduction to it, was we were talking in a text thread that several of us are in. And we were just basically marveling at how Grüns is just killing it right now. So I reached out to Chad, got to know him a little bit. Jason's got a relationship with Chad that goes way back to, it sounds like 2020, which seems like a lifetime ago. And Chad, I guess to kind of start things off, you're interesting because you are somebody that's coming from the investment world into the operator world. I don't feel like I've heard a lot of those stories. I guess, Jason, that's kind of your story on a much more.
Jason's the only other one.
We've got both of them on this podcast, but let's kind of maybe start there. I'd love to hear your story, share your background of how you came to Grüns.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the pod. First of all, obviously a weekly listener, gathered a lot over the last couple of years as I've been building Grüns from you all and the insights that you share. I've actually always been more of an entrepreneur, but in an effort to sort of leave optionality open in my career, I went down the path of investment banking and looked at consulting for a while and was an investor. Um, but yeah, I graduated back in 2017, went out to New York, did investment banking at a firm called Lazard. I hated it. Um, I found it, and it's not from like the amount of hours that you work. Like that was totally fine. Obviously, I work a lot of hours now. It was like the management style of not knowing where your work was going. And this is more probably a problem at like the analyst level. You just don't know where your work ends up, like the impact of that work. And so I ended up leaving a year in to go start a business. Ran that business for a year. Sunsetted in 2019, joined Summit Partners, an investment firm, and spent all my time investing in consumer. Um, and spent, I was there for 3 years, ended up investing in about 12 different direct to consumer, primarily e-commerce brands. Some of those were on the fringe of launching into retail, like Dr. Swatch. So I was there at the time when they were deciding between Target or Walmart as their launch partner, and having those discussions at the board level. And then in 2022, I left to go get my MBA at Stanford. And, I had this problem in my life of always committing to too much at once. I can't say no. And so it's like, I'm always doing too much. And I remember going to Stanford being like, look, I'm just going to like enjoy this experience, like be a student for once. I didn't have that experience in undergrad. And it was like, even before getting to Stanford, I was in my dad's office out in Utah. They moved to Utah back in 2011. And I'm sitting there drinking a greens powder, day 2 of drinking this greens powder, just looking up at the corner of my office being like, there's no way I'm keeping this habit past 30 days. It's gross. It's messy. There's like weird frothy sediment at the bottom. And so I started thinking about like, how can I take comprehensive nutrition, not greens? I think there's this terminology of greens that probably does a disservice to comprehensive nutrition. So a lot more than greens. And how do I take comprehensive nutrition and put it in a format or some habit that people will look forward to and enjoy? And that's how I had the idea for Grüns. I ended up spending a year working on it. And at that point, I wasn't really looking to start something, but it felt so obvious to me and a real opportunity that, this is back in 2022. So I don't think that greens were getting hated on the way that they maybe do today. The green powders maybe were part of the reason that people have come out and started talking more about it. But there's just this hunch that like everybody else was having an experience like me where it just wasn't as fun of an experience. It's hard to stick to. You get these ads that are like, it's delicious. I'm for the green powders, it's delicious. It's so easy. But then the actual lived experience wasn't that way for me. So I figured, more people are probably experiencing that. So to come back to your question, I think, I did this stint as an investor, but I think even as an investor, I was pitching some of our portfolio companies like kind of wild entrepreneurial ideas. And so it's always sort of been in me, but I did have a stint where I think probably had really cool access to understanding like proprietary data, right? Like LTV to CAC, growth rates, board level decisions that these brands are making, literally 300 plus brands that I talked to during that period.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting.
Chad, I mean, you had the most incredible education in building consumer businesses, right? You probably talk to hundreds of businesses, and as an investor, we're involved in sourcing, probably a couple of dozen investments. And it's incredible how much you see then. And then you went to business school, which is also really an amazing experience, which I did as well. And then you were like, you had the idea in a great space, and you managed to create a product that was a good product, right? Like we've all tried it. And like, this is this is like this is like checking all the boxes. Like it's not typical, right? Like that. A lot of people that want to start a business, they haven't seen what you've seen. So when I see how successful Grüns is, and when I see everyone talking about the brand and you, I'm just like, well, of course, like this seems totally natural to me that you, like, the harder you work, the luckier you get. You worked so hard, then you had an idea and it worked, and it's amazing. So congratulations.
One question I'd have, Chad, is how much do you think all of the proprietary data that you saw helped you to filter through these entrepreneurial ideas that you were seeing? Was it you started to kind of pattern identify the most successful companies you were looking at, and that helped you to think about the type of company that you might want to build someday?
Yeah, there's this moment, it was probably like a month into working at Summit as an investor, that consumer clicked for me. Like back in 2017, the group I was in investment banking was industrials. So like all the boring, like machinery type stuff. And we sat next to the consumer group. And I literally remember saying to my friends in the investment banking class, like, I do not understand how consumers buy, how they purchase. I was a self-proclaimed minimalist at the time. And then it wasn't until like a month into Summit, you don't get like an industry where you're investing in. I stumbled upon consumer. Nobody was really covering it at Summit. And the whole LTV to CAC equation clicked for me. And I would even say, like, it's not just for consumables. Like, I hear a lot of people talk about LTV to CAC's not real. To me, it's real. Like, even if you get 90% of that LTV to CAC on day zero, when someone orders, like, great. It's still a real equation that results in a P&L EBITDA output, depending on how fast you're going. So I would say that for me, I have a very vivid memory, and I would hop on the phone, and my primary objective when I was calling into, frankly, like probably a lot of the $100 million plus brands that are in this space, I've chatted with the founders and CEOs of those companies, and I have a very vivid memory. So like, I know their margin profiles, I know their LTV to CAC curves, and I think over time it became really clear to me how that plays out, some of the mistakes people were making. And my primary objective was just to be friends with these people. Like, it didn't really matter if I knew it was a great business, if these people didn't like me. Like, you got to have them like you first for it even to be a question if, they want to take your money and partner with you. And so I would say to answer your question, I wasn't really looking for a business. Like, I definitely wasn't looking to start like in the consumer space, but it felt very like native to me at that point, having seen so much. And then I would say, like, being able to leverage all of those experiences, all of those insights, the LTV to CAC curves, like all of that's in my head, and knowing what's good, what's best in class, has allowed us to scale really quickly, because I know contextually, is this good? Okay, should we push on the gas a little bit more? And so I would say it's been really critical from a scaling standpoint. Maybe not from like I wasn't necessarily sitting over there saying like, oh, it's got to be supplements. Maybe I should pick this category over here. I was just a guy who tried a green powder and thought it tasted disgusting and figured I could do something better.
It's interesting because literally I was having a conversation about lifetime value to customer acquisition cost yesterday with the CEO of our Trevi brand. It's one of those things that good operators actually talk a lot about. I'm curious, Matt, Jason, with the businesses you guys run, how early did you start thinking about, hey, what really are these numbers, and how is this going to impact the way that we think about how much we're willing to pay for people?
On Pila case, it's like Ridge, it's zero. Like, we eat what we kill on day one. It's like we got to go out and hunt thousands of customers every day, because our repeat like the time frame in which somebody comes back and buys from us in that brand is like 2 years, 3 years. So we really try to ignore it. Even though it like, now we're 7 years into the brand, it's actually super important, because like the brand value and the customers coming back matters quite a bit. It's a big chunk of the revenue that comes in every year. And we're old enough now that we can actually count on it, to what Chad is saying. Like we can model out, like we know every year now with a lot of confidence how many people are going to come back and buy from us in that company. In Lomi, it was day one. It was built on a device sale with a back-end filter subscription. And we kind of like everything was just mathed out right away. We're like, all right, we know what we can buy a customer for. We have a sense for what they're going to stick around. Like we can see usage of device. So it's the whole business is modeled off of it. It's not in a, like, not like what you would do, Mike, with Trevi or Chad with Grüns. Like it's not the same because we do have a large front end purchase with that one. But I would say it's probably like in that kind of business where it's like high repeat rate, or in our case, subscription, dude, it's, I don't know what you're doing if you're not doing that. Like I honestly, like, why are you here?
LTV to CAC it's a metric that's been used in investing for decades, and it kind of comes out of software investing, and then it's been applied to subscription mainly, right? Because so we don't think about LTV to CAC, like we're AOV to CAC, period. LTV is nice. We look at LTV because people care about that, but we have to make like a real margin on our very first customer. It started because no one would give Danny and Cole any money at the beginning. And then, when I came on board, the reason why I joined, frankly, when the company was like, the reason why I got involved when the company was under 20 million in revenue, because I just saw that every sale was profitable, like pretty profitable. So that was exciting to me. But I think LTV to CAC is a lot harder to get right, because there's more time involved. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And, I'm very interested in what Chad is doing, because I also I look at the powder companies, there's a big one out there that's raised a ton of money, that's done a lot. And I have to say, I've always felt that there was a lot of risk there, because how much marketing you're underwriting, how much you're willing to pay to acquire that customer. Man, if you're wrong, you're right.
You're definitely wrong. You're screwed if you go long on that payback. And I think, Chad, that was actually one of the things that stood out to me. You and I had a private conversation, but my probably number one takeaway from it is this is somebody who's really disciplined about his customer acquisition costs. As a result of what he knows about customer values, he's really disciplined. And I think that makes sense. I mean, maybe you could comment on this. My perception from the outside is that the investment community really soured on D2C type businesses, in large part because they banked on these future LTVs that never showed up in a bunch of brands. And that it kind of became a little bit of an uninvestable space. There are obviously some real winners. You've actually been involved with some of the really big winners that came out of that era, but there were a lot more stories of things that didn't work out. So I don't know. I think that might be something worth talking about, is how when you run your team, you obviously do need to really care about being disciplined about what you're paying to acquire. How do you prevent yourself from talking yourself into going an extra 2, 3, 5 months out to get payback to grow faster?
You're totally right. I think most of the D2C darlings that have had trouble in recent years, but were doing well, putting quotation marks on video here, during the 2018 to 2021 era, they didn't have discipline around CAC. And so there was this if you don't know what your LTV is, you shouldn't be guessing what your CAC should be. So when I started the business, we have a CAC ceiling. You could ask anybody at Grüns, they won't tell you because we have a very closed off, internally transparent, externally opaque culture. But you could ask anybody at Grüns what our CAC ceiling is, and they would know. CX associate, CMO, everyone knows exactly what that ceiling is for our CAC, the gospel around it. And that ceiling was very different when I first launched. I picked something very low. And then as month 2 came in, I was seeing the retention, said, hey, let's bump it a little bit. As we launched Amazon and I needed to factor in a little bit of a runoff into Amazon from the D2C spend, bumped it a little bit. And then I think it was in April of last year, we set a CAC ceiling based on, at that point, 7-8 months of data from our cohorts, and didn't move it. Now, I run the business, have always run the business, and I would encourage everybody to run their business as a minimum 3 times LTV, fully burdened LTV, delivered to the door, gross profit to CAC. That is a standard for investors that they love to see. I would say strategics see that as best in class. And if you just play out what the like EBITDA margin output is of a 3 times LTV to CAC business, it's great.
For anybody listening who's like, just to make it really clear what we're saying, you're saying, hey, if you run your calculation, and I guess start here, you think about lifetime value, you think about what period of time?
3 years.
Yeah, not the heat death of the universe, right? Like we're talking like 3 years. So in the next 3 years, we think this customer will be worth, let's just say, we think they're going to be worth $300. If that was our number, then you would say the kind of gospel best in class is that you're paying $100 or less to acquire that person.
Correct. And I would say, to be clear on the 300, that's not revenue. That's delivered to the door when the product shows up on your doorstep. How much profit did you take?
This is post refunds. Yeah. This is post, and that's really like a huge, huge point that I would like triple click on, is that there are all these little ways that you have money go out the door that it kind of erodes at your margins. And if you don't account for those, you can be really, really wrong in your estimation of LTV. So you have to kind of sit there and say like, okay, you use the word fully burdened, but just again, trying to make that as accessible to anybody listening to the podcast as possible. That's just saying you're scraping every part of your business and saying, where are all the little ways that money goes out, where the margins get kind of eroded. And anyway, so I think it's a great point. So you're saying you need to be at 3 or more of that ratio.
Yeah, and I think things will make it complicated as you launch Amazon. That makes it a little bit more complicated because you're probably not spending enough on Amazon like direct marketing. And so a lot of what's happening on Amazon is runoff from direct to consumer spend. So what you're spending to drive demand on your D2C site. And then similar with retail, right? Like we've had really good retail velocities without needing to like put a ton of retail marketing into it as we try to keep up inventory. And so there's some excess capacity over there to spend, and the 3 times LTV to CAC equation gets a little bit muddy. I think last month we made some real strides in how to actually look at LTV to CAC on a retail customer and on an Amazon customer and blend it so that the blended LTV to CAC across the business is at least 3 times. But it does get complicated as you start to scale out operations.
Jason, Matt, I guess, Matt, you guys don't have physical retail. Jason, you've got some, but we all have omni-channel of some sort. How much do you try and track customers across different channels to try and understand okay, Sally comes in on the website, she buys this. How do I pull in what Sally's doing on Amazon or what she's doing in Costco? Or do you just not even try to do that?
I mean, for Costco, it's super hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's opaque.
That's our big channel retail. But I don't know, Jason, if you guys have cracked that. We don't even try because that's like we get PDFs.
We have some very rudimentary tracking because we have a warranty on our pans. And through like post-purchase survey data, et cetera, we can get like some directional information that is useful. I do want to go back to what Chad was saying about the Amazon halo effect, right? You spend money on Meta and people are just going to go to Amazon, spend money on Google. People are just going to go to Amazon. And so how do you think about that, Chad? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it probably raised back in January of last year, 2024, when we launched Amazon. I think I raised our CAC ceiling by like 10%. It was more of a gut feel. There was cushion in there in terms of what, like we were running above a 3 times LTV to CAC. So I felt like, hey, like let's just use this as a proxy for now. And then as we've launched retail, right? Like we launched Sprouts back in December of 2024, Target in February of 2025 and Walmart in April. That's a lot of doors. Like we're in over 4,000 doors now. We're on NCAP. And I think you can look at, we're just now getting some of this like Spins data back. Spins is a platform that shows you retail data. So you can actually track the consumer's LTV on retail specifically. And I think for us, it's a little bit different than maybe Matt or Jason here. And Mike, maybe it's a little bit different for you, but you probably have some repeat nature that Matt and Jason don't as much. I don't necessarily care whether Mike bought on Amazon and then he bought on D2C and then he bought at Target. Because if I take the aggregate view of what the customer is doing on Amazon, that like messy noise will be in the LTV of the Amazon customer, right? So they may look like, oh, the Amazon customer is like worsening, but we're acquiring somebody over in D2C really well, better than usual. Well, that's really just Mike and all of the Mike lookalikes coming from Amazon to D2C and then over to retail. And so all of that's in the LTV data. And so it's up to you to look at that and say, okay, let's forget about all that noise. I don't necessarily care whether Mike's bought in 3 different channels. What I care about is, a retail consumer is going to provide this blank LTV in a 3-year period. I'm open to spending a CAC that's a third of that. The reality is you probably can't spend enough in retail to hit that 3 times specific retail LTV to CAC. So you might have a 12 times LTV to CAC in retail and make up for some of that with D2C spend. So your D2C LTV to CAC may be a sub 3, but you're able to blend it in the business whole.
Yeah, that's what's awesome about retail. Retail, that ratio just blows out. You just the numbers really work your way.
Okay, it's no secret that margins are getting squeezed and profitability is a challenge for brands in 2025. Not a secret. That is where Northbeam's profitability benchmarks come in. It's a new feature. You could check it out. This is a tool from Northbeam that tells you the exact targets that you need to hit to get to profit inside of Northbeam. So no more guessing, no more month-end financial surprises. Hitting these targets helps you ensure that your ad campaigns are actually driving the right behaviors to make your business profitable. That is wonderful. The brands that track this stuff probably already do in Google Sheets. I know I do. I'm going to be checking out this Northbeam new feature. And Northbeam is a big level up from this. And here's what sets kind of what I have seen. Here's what sets profitability benchmarks apart. So instantly you get to quantify your goals into clear benchmarks. Every ad gets measured against those targets right inside of Northbeam. That's kind of cool, actually. And you see, and you can kind of at a glance see which ads are doing well, which needs to go against profitability benchmarks, not just ROAS or whatever else you're using right now. You scale up the winners, you cut the losers, you know the drill. It is hard to argue that this is not great for brands. Profitability benchmarks from Northbeam is like having a speedometer in all your channels, campaigns, ads. You can kind of see everything at a glance against profitability, not something else. So stop leaving money on the table, fuel your creative performance, make every ad dollar count in every channel, hold them all to the same standard. If you want to reach out to Northbeam, just let them know the operator sent you and they will take good care of you.
Ultimately, what's making your company just blow up and so successful is that you've crushed it on product. Tell us about how you did product development, because like you said, it really started with, hey, I think this green powder, getting greens in some kind of a supplement form makes sense. And I think there's a better way to do it. And you guys have obviously found a really effective way to do it. So how did you go about actually bringing the product to market? And then you've also done a lot of interesting things in subsequent product launches. Would love to hear how you guys are approaching product dev.
Yeah, it was actually harder than I thought getting this off the ground. When I had the idea, I started calling around to co-mans and packaging partners, and I would literally had probably like 50 conversations that I would ask the first one, hey, if I was talking to Gummy co-manufacturer who produces the products, who are the best packaging partners? And then I go talk to those people, and then I'd ask them who are the best Gummy co-mans. And I slowly whittled to who I thought were actually the best. And what was crazy is like I would talk to these Gummy co-mans, and every time they were like, that's not going to work. It's going to taste disgusting. No way we're going to do that. You're just another like starry-eyed founder. It's not going to work. I found one finally who was willing to give it a go, but they also said like, there's no way this is going to taste good. And I said, look, just do it. Here's the formulation. Here's what I want in the product. let's all taste it and then we'll say whether it tastes bad or good, right? Like let's actually produce it and see. And the first iteration was pretty good. Now, I spent a year from like August of 2022 to August of 2023 when we launched, going through dozens of iterations on this, and not just testing like formulation, the science of it, also testing like, should it be a gummy bear? Or should it be a gumdrop? How many gummies should be in a pack? What's the color? What's the smell? What's the taste? All of those things were tested, and they were blind sample surveys I was doing. So I was actually at Stanford campus. Probably half of my class were part of the guinea pigs on this. And I thought it was a good place to do it because Stanford's interesting because you have a lot of people from different backgrounds, a lot of ethnicities, a lot of nationalities. And so you get a lot of different opinions. It's sort of like a weird place where, if I went to the D2C community, we might have a bunch of Chads trying this product, and we can kind of get in our own bubble of like what a good product looks like. And I got some good feedback from that. And so that, spent that year formulating, it became really clear what the product should look like. So the product you see today is highly intentional. But I think the biggest unlock for me, a year back in August of 2022, when I had the idea, was like, why hasn't somebody put this in a gummy? And I think the world that gummy represented back then is a 60 count bottle, 1 to 2 gummy serving size. And so for me, the big unlock, and we all look at it today and we're probably like, yeah, like it's a sachet, it's got 8 gummies in it, whatever. But like, that's new. That's not like a format that really existed at the time.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got your product being like, this is different. Like I've never seen these kind of micro packets of gummies before.
And here's the crazy part. The infrastructure to do that didn't exist when I launched.
Well, maybe that's why I'd never seen it, because it literally didn't even exist.
It works for pills. It works for powders. But the machines, gummies is a hard technology because it's a little sticky. And so it can get stuck in the machines. And so for the first 8 months of this business, this is going to sound crazy, but this is what you do when you pave the path for a new format to exist in the world. Our first co-man, we now have 3. We're probably onboarding a 4th soon. That first co-man, they had 20 bodies with gloves standing around a table, taking 8 gummies, sticking them in the sachets and clamp sealing them. Super manual for the first 8 months before we got machinery, and had pioneered how you do this with the gummy format. But it was a slog for the first 8 months of this business.
It's like, have any of you guys read Apple in China? If you haven't, it's great. I got put onto it. I'd recommend it to anybody listening to this podcast. But one of the things that they talk about there is like Foxconn, and a lot of the reason why Foxconn becomes Foxconn is just their raw ambition and willingness to be like, we will try anything. And it's interesting when people go and think about their supply chain and who do I want in a co-man or who do I want in a manufacturer. Man, just ambition and willingness to try things is so valuable. Where it's just 8 gummies in a package. Never seen that before. Let's figure it out. Most co-mans, like you said, would just be like, nope, that's not what we do. Nope, not going to do that. And some of our best product ideas have been us going to our one of our manufacturers and saying, hey, we want to do this thing that we've never seen before. You want to help us try? And they get excited about it. They're like, yeah, let's try it. I don't know if we can make it work, but let's try it. So I'd recommend that to everybody.
It runs counter to what manufacturers are though, Mike.
Exactly.
I think their entire business is replication, not innovation. So to find a manufacturer in any category that's willing to try something, we saw this with Lomi. We had to build our own manufacturing. We went to a factory. We said, look, we know you don't want to do this, so we'll do it. We'll pay for it. We'll design the line. We'll figure out how to assemble the whole damn thing. We threw our engineers at their factory. And all we said was you just need to provide the bodies, right? And the building and the power and everything else that you have.
In the Apple in China book, that's kind of one of the stories is that the Foxconn and then more generally kind of China and Taiwan realize this is a great way to get our people trained. If we can convince these American companies, we're willing to try all your crazy stuff if you'll send some of the intellectual capital. And so I also think on the manufacturing side, it's a great customer acquisition. It's just got to be an absolute beat down to try and compete on margins in a commoditized category with a whole bunch of other people.
Do you know, I don't know if I've told you guys this. Chad, you might hear this for the first time. Our initial factory for Lomi was a toy factory because they're the only ones psycho enough in China to make anything new. The entire toy industry is You have an idea, 6 months later, we're going to put it on a shelf in Walmart. Every single appliance company or like device company we went to was like, not a chance. Like, we do not know how to make those. That's not a thing. It's a new category. Chad, similar to what you were doing with like this pack for this type of thing. Everybody kicked us out. They laughed us out of the room. The toy guys were like, sure. Somebody showed up one day with a drone. We did that too.
But I mean, it kind of gets to that point, Matt, that like sometimes even the specific skill set is not as important as just like a willingness to try something. Like, you were able to build a pretty revolutionary product with people that on paper don't have the skill set to make that product, but they had the willingness to try to do something. So like, I think one of the interesting questions, like when you're whatever, like hyper scaling, whatever word we'd use for the way that Grüns has grown, because it's, like you said, you're kind of externally opaque. So I won't ask you to like share any numbers other than they're really crazy. They're really big, really fast. You did take a round publicly. That's a big round with a big valuation attached. There's a very small number of companies for sure in the D2C space that have ever gotten to that kind of valuation that quickly. It might be the fastest I've ever seen. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. But with that, like the scaling that comes with that has all kinds of operational headaches. What's been one or two of the most challenging things you've had to deal with operationally, Chad, as you guys have scaled at this amazing rate?
100% inventory. And more specifically, if you double in the course of 3 months and you're an early business, it's not that bad for a co-man to pick up that demand and say, hey, I got you. Like, we'll just run you an extra day here. But when you start doubling at larger scale in a quick period, you got to onboard a new co-man, right? Like, you got to, and if you're a reputable brand, you have to have good quality control in place. So it's not like you just like onboard a new co-man. Like, you got to be planning on that 6 to 9 months ahead. So I'll give you an example. Our third co-man, we started the process of onboarding when we felt so good on capacity. It was like, oh my goodness, the second co-man's on. We've got great production here. It feels like capacity is going to last for a long time. And it was like, no, we know our forecast. We know where we're headed. We got to get working on this new co-man right now. Otherwise, in 6 months, we're going to feel some massive pain and have to turn off the marketing engine. So that's been the hardest thing. And I would add to that, we talked a little bit about that process of putting gummies in sachets. The hardest part is every time we onboard a new co-man, we have to teach them. Here's how you do it. Here's the machine you use. Here are the things to watch out for. And there's a good sharing happening across the 3, potentially 4th co-man soon. But we're actually taking a lot of that pack out process in-house. So we have a Dallas facility we just opened last month where we receive gummies in bulk, and Grüns in-house will be doing a lot of that pack out, right? Because it's a lot easier to scale a new co-man to produce gummies than it is to go in there, produce gummies, buy this machine. Let me train your people who know how to produce gummies and how to now put gummies in packages.
Yeah, it's totally separate thing.
Totally
really.
separate.
Yeah, Jason kind of reminds me of Hexclad. You guys obviously have been hyperscaling and over a long period, but then you also have like kind of a really proprietary thing with your pans. How have you dealt with just the inventory headaches? I know you've talked about it some, but you'll post sometimes in chat like how many containers, like I don't know if you're willing to share this publicly, but just like he'll post how many containers that they are shipping, and it's just this absurd number, like
Hexclad Armada.
Yeah, 20% of the containers on the ocean are somehow carrying Hexclad.
Our head of ops did this awesome like AI image of a container ship, like literally filled with Hexclad, and like that's what shipped in Q4 of last year. It's like crazy. We've got months of 150 plus 40-foot containers coming in on a ship because our boxes are just big. But in terms of inventory, we had kind of Foxconn. It's interesting how talk about Foxconn because like they scaled alongside of Apple. I think I didn't read the book, but I think that's the case, right? And so our factory, our main cookware factory, they produce 95% of our cookware, and we're 95% of their production. They're our partner. Like we have been together from the beginning when they were doing like 10 a month. So like every 2 years they build a new Hexclad factory, and we go see it, and there's a new sign says Hexclad, and they just keep building new factories for us down in southern China. And so like there have been times when they haven't been able to scale. Like in 2021, 2022, we had difficulty scaling and we were out of stock. And I remember like right before Christmas, literally being at the warehouse at South Anderson and waiting for a container of pot sets to come in so that we can ship them out with the pan sets so that people would get their 13-piece set in time for Christmas. And like the whole senior management team was unloading a container and slapping a label on it and putting it in a UPS truck. I did that.
Yeah, just basically cross-docking inventory. It was, yeah.
You know, we did all that. So, you know, it's just, that's like a high-class problem of scale. And the other problem is cash. You know, like if you have like Sean keeps a ton of inventory. His inventory are very small, doesn't take up a lot of space, but I've heard him say like he's got a year's worth of inventory. Now, I don't think that's good, like inventory turn management from a financial reporting perspective, but
it's also easier when it's aluminum as opposed to like a gummy that's going to like, you know, you don't want a year-old gummy going out to Target or something.
It's amazing how Chad has scaled and the ability to produce all this. I mean, it really is, it's incredible operational.
Shout out to our ops team. Like, you know, it's never become more clear to me as I've talked to some big gummy players in the market, who are just like baffled at what we've done in 2 years. It's never become more clear to me, and I've never had more appreciation for what the operations team is doing than hearing like experts in the space like genuinely surprised at our ability to stand up these commands. But it's because we start scaling them up or standing them up, onboarding them, you know, well in advance of needing them. It's not like, oh, we need them, we'll get them onboarded in 6 months now.
Man, two things this makes me think of. One is like, I just, you've said it a couple of times, Chad, but I want to like reiterate it for people listening to this. I've now been a part of businesses that are scaling for 15 years. And if you wait until you have to have something, you're dead. You know, like you really do have to get in front of things. And that's the hard part about scaling. It's kind of like the exponential growth with technology. And a lot of people have written about this, that like the human brain's just not able to really kind of comprehend it. And so it'll catch you really off guard. And you tend to think like, hey, what's happened the last 3 or 4 years? Okay, if that happened the next 3 or 4 years ahead, where are we going to be? And then it's like, wait, we're like 10 times that level of advancement. It's just because the exponential nature. Scaling a company is the same way. If you try and say like, okay, what did we need a year ago? Okay, what do I think we'll need a year from now? You'll always undershoot it when you're growing at these really rapid rates because your brain just can't wrap it around. But one of the things like that I've noticed about myself, I don't know if you guys can relate with this, one of my more toxic traits is that I can tend to think like the hard part is getting to sales and getting like the kind of the model established of like, okay, we're acquiring customers well, we're acquiring them at good economics. And now it's basically just execution and kind of easy stuff of like just filling the orders and keeping the trains running. And the reason I think it's a really toxic trait is like, it gets real hand wavy that like a lot of times the keeping the trains running is the hardest part. There's a reason why, you know, to use the Apple analogy, there's a reason why Tim Cook ended up being Steve Jobs' replacement, that like the operational side of things, I've talked about this with my CMO several times. What sucks about being in operations is that you don't get a lot of pats on the back when things go well. You just kind of get people's attention when it's like, hey, where was that shipment? Hey, why is the factory screwing things up? Why were there defects on this order? You basically just hear about it when things aren't going well. And then when things go well, it's just like, yeah, you did your job. So what? So I don't know. Like I just want to emphasize what you said, that like everybody listening to this, like go hug your ops person. I don't know, but it's a tough job.
Our ops department is incredible. I mean, they're the unsung heroes of Hexclad. When I just look at all of the operational situations that they're dealing with, and our ops were like terrible for the first couple of years that I was here. And so we always had major issues and major mistakes that cost us big money. And we finally figured out that we needed to get better. It took a while. It took a lot of beatings, but we built out an incredible, best in class ops team. And that is a very, like, that investment is just like reduced so much stress in our organization. So highly recommend that. Like I always say, invest in understanding your numbers really early and invest in your ops really early. Like, don't be cheap about that. If you really think your business is going to succeed and scale, invest early there.
Well, and if you're going to partner with the Targets, the Walmarts of the world, they value predictability in your supply chain and operations. I'm not going to say they value it more than productivity, but it's pretty close, because their model is all about being able to kind of make this promise to the customer that, hey, you show up and we're going to have stuff on the shelves. And so you can be wildly productive, but if you're also wildly inconsistent in your supply chain, that's going to wear thin really quickly. And they're going to kind of sharpen the knives for when your performance drops off. So it's just a really big deal that your partners are going to care a ton about as you scale.
Yeah, the precision thing with retail, huge. Like when they give you ship windows, you hit them. That's not negotiable.
Like Walmart's big thing is OTIF, on time and full, and it's like that's their gospel metric.
You don't have a choice.
When you get started as a new brand, you don't realize that they'll send in a PO and expect it to be like turned around immediately. So you need to be doing the job on your end, forecasting, producing inventory that you're ready for when they say ship, you can ship. And I'd say that's why a lot of brands probably have trouble when they launch into retail, is they're not doing that. They're not building up inventory for these retailers to be a good partner.
Yeah.
But if you looked at our OKRs, it's the number one. On time, in full, 100%, we got to deliver to be good partners. And I do think that's really critical to your point, Mike. Like you've got to deliver on that.
You actually have to be the forecaster. Like you're doing your own demand forecast for the retailer.
100%.
Like they're not going to do that for you.
They'll give you a number, but that number is like, my Cavachon puppy could probably come up with about as good a number, because you're just kind of grabbing something out of the sky initially, and if you think that they gave you a number and you prepare for that number. If you don't hit that number one way or another, you're not going to get a pass on it. If you're doubling that sales rate, they're going to expect you to be able to support it. And if you're half that sales rate, they're going to say, it's going to be like, sorry, you're heavy on inventory. It's just the way it is. So I think we're absolutely onto something. I mean, my observation about the D2C kind of community, the e-com community, is that the worst version of it is all you think about is marketing, basically, and product. And there's no operational backbone. One of the best things we did in the history of the company, and it sucked so bad. We went from the marketplace to 1P with Amazon, and I kid you not, our switchover date was March 15th, 2020. And it was literally like 3 days before COVID went bananas. And so we had to basically grow this entire organizational, operational backbone to now we went from like just shipping containers directly into Amazon in California to like having to fill all these POs. And it was incredibly painful, and there was a lot of tension in the organization from it. But then, because we had grown those capabilities, as we started to layer on all the retailers and we started to grow, we were able to support it because we developed those muscles.
Operators, Black Friday, Cyber Monday is coming up. Is your SMS list ready? If not, get on Postscript. They are helping us drive 14% more email signups through their better opt-ins. They're helping us get 6% more SMS subs every single day because they have perfected the art of pop-ups. You need to build your list. You have to nurture your list. You have to take care of your list. Postscript is the best at that. They're the number one name in SMS. It's their number one revenue driver. We are excited and ready to take advantage of all of the lists we've built all year, okay? Postscript has the best opt-in of all time. It is single sign-in, password autofill right on your phone, and we're going to get probably another 100,000 people to sign up between now and the end of the year. We're going to use those people. We're going to use SMS to nurture them through the funnel. It's an amazing tool. I love it. Make sure you're ready for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Postscript is here to help guide you through everything that you need when it comes to SMS. more opt-ins, more list building. Make sure you don't look like an amateur this BFCM. Use Postscript. Tell them Sean sent you. Tell them the operator sent you. Postscript will audit your SMS program for free and show you how to scale fast before Black Friday, Cyber Monday hits. When we talk about list growth, that's what you have to use before, during, and after Black Friday. You want serious gains. You want Postscript. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Chad, real quick, man, on the growth, like, because your speed has been insane. I'm going to ask the dumb question of why go so fast? Like, why the extreme up and to the right? You know, we've talked on this show in the past about how, like, in consumer, there are rarely winner take all, if any, right? Like, I think the biggest brand in the world might be Coca-Cola, and they have like 18% market share on Coke. And they had to buy every other category and every other brand to get to like 48 of beverage. So is the speed thing just a personal style, or is it strategic? It's about competition. It's about category.
I'm impatient. So that's probably like the number one thing. I'm a very impatient person. And I think a lot of the concern that people have about growing fast, you know, like I'll point out a brand that pumped really quickly and then fell off a cliff. Goalie, right? We all know the apple cider vinegar brand. The reason why that business fell off a cliff is because they were acquiring too many customers. They don't have a lot of LTV. They're churning through the universe of customers way too quickly. Now, contrast that to us, right? People like to compare us sometimes because Gummy. It's an easy comparison. We're not growing fast because we're acquiring a ton of customers. Yeah, like we're acquiring a lot of people, but that's not really the reason we're growing. We're growing fast because, Matt, if you bought from Grüns today, you're going to spend like, I don't want to say exactly how much, but like a lot more in the following 365 days than you did on day zero. So what's happening here is we're stacking all these cohorts together, all under a disciplined 3 times minimum LTV to CAC. And so the way I've thought about it from the beginning, and you know, we've raised a few rounds over the course of this business, it was always the same thing I would tell investors. I'm gonna grow as fast as the world lets me at that CAC ceiling, because I know that I get at least a 3 times LTV to CAC. So if that means that there's 50,000 customers in a month that I can go get at that efficiency, I'm gonna go get them, because that's what the world's telling me I can do this month. If it happens to be 5,000 this month, no problem. I'll go get 5,000 because that's what the efficiency says. I don't want to acquire somebody if they're unprofitable to me, and I set my profitability metric at 3 times. And so the output of that is our growth, right? Like, it's not like I've chosen, I got to grow and hit these targets. Our investor group isn't telling me to hit these targets. They mostly let us cook. And it's because we have a lot of discipline around, here's the efficiency, the P&L is an output of that.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. That's kind of why I asked. Yeah.
There also is this thing called first mover advantage, which in some businesses like really makes a difference. And in this space where Chad is, you know, AG, I think they were really successful because they went out and they grabbed a big lead.
Yeah, they kind of created the idea.
They kind of created it, right? And so I think it's to some extent that's what Grüns is doing. And so, like, stepping on the gas, as long as you can have the LTV to CAC discipline that you do, you definitely wouldn't want to leave anything on the table, like, because you just, that first mover advantage and being, you know, we're the first hybrid pan. Like, no one ever talked about a hybrid pan before Hexclad. There are lots of people talking about a hybrid pan now, but we are the real, true hybrid pan. That does matter.
That matters a ton, Jason. I mean, like, look, if anybody creates anything that looks like Hexclad, that's like Hexclad knockoff. I mean, we've had people try to put gummies in sachets, these little packs. And even if it's a completely separate formulation, has nothing to do with comprehensive nutrition, they're like, why are you ripping off Grüns? That's exactly what we want. We want any business that takes that like new format, we want to own it. We want people to see that and say, that's Grüns. Like, why are you taking their, I don't know, why are you stealing from them? Like, why are you ripping them off? Even if it literally is a different need state, a different product, just because it looks similar, we got to own that.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at trade trade dress and trademarks, trademarks is basically like anything that a customer starts to associate with a brand, and really the standard in trade dress lawsuits is something confusingly similar. But what you learn when you study trademark law is that it can be anything. It can be a color, it can be a sound, it can be a slogan, it can be the packaging. That if you are able to kind of associate, hey, yeah, this little gummy packet, like, that must be by Grüns because they're by Grüns. I keep saying, it's so funny. I keep saying Grüns and instead of Grüns, and I'm doing the thing that all of us as founders hate the most. I don't know if this has been
It
true for
doesn't
you
bother me.
guys. Well, it bothers me because like it's nails on a chalkboard when people will say Simply Modern to me, and I'm like, I'm gonna lose my mind. I've been introduced for like speaking, like they're asking me to come up on stage and they'll call it Simply Modern, and so it's like, I think it's the curse of when you start something. I don't know if Hexclad can be mispronounced.
Hexclad, there's no way Hexclad gets mispronounced.
Yeah, but there's got to be Matt. You have to deal with this, right?
Oh, Pila and Pella. Like in America, everybody calls it Pella because of the Spanish influence, and then we call it Pila because we're stupid.
I feel like that's just like a dumb influence. In the US, if you go abroad, everybody calls it Grüns because they know it's German. It means green in German. And they know that U sound, and basically every other language has a oo sound to it. But for some reason in America, you get this like 70-30 split where 70% of people think it's Grüns. And it's like, look, I don't really mind what you call it as long as you're buying.
That's because Americans think that American's a language. That's why.
When my brother and I had quibids, we'd hear it all, quibids and quibids, and we'd hear every variation of it. So I just think that's when you create anything, you have to release the pronunciation of it. But so you mentioned this, Chad. I think it's really interesting with consumables. You don't necessarily need tens of millions of people. You don't need tens of millions of people using your product to have an awesome business. You don't even necessarily need millions of people using your product to have an awesome business, but you do need people to be super fans of the product. One of the things we've talked about on here is like you're in health, and the downside to kind of health can be the faddishness. The kind of the bone broth effect of like, oh, everybody's excited about, getting their greens and how do you protect yourself against that aspect of the category that you're in?
Yeah, we only play in categories that are permanent. So we don't I'll give you an example. Everybody talks about creatine and creatine gummies right now. I would be so scared to run one of those businesses. Yeah, the science behind creatine is phenomenal. But from a fad standpoint, people don't always follow science perfectly. So like there's some risk there that it's not going to be in vogue in a couple of years here in the way that it is today. So like, how does that impact your business? That's hard. Comprehensive nutrition, like that's fundamental to us living, right? Like if what you're talking about is like putting salads in a powder and chopping it up and throwing it in a blender, like, yeah, that might be faddish the same way like juicing was, like 15 years ago. But that's not what we are, right? Like we're comprehensive nutrition. It's the nutrients your body needs, the foundational support. And if science shows that there's something that we're missing from our formula for that, then we'll insert it into the product, right? So it's not, and then I'll give you like nootrops. Like these are growing categories. We're not attaching ourselves to an ingredient like, oh, L-theanine. We're going to be the first gummy that puts L-theanine in the gummy, and we're just going to absolutely own that. There's businesses that do that so well, right? Like you guys are all friends with Mary Ruth Organics. I've chatted with them several times. I think what they're doing is very different than us. And that's exactly what they have to do. They have to find those trends, get there first, do clinicals behind them, own that ingredient. And it's always finding that next one that's going to be the big thing. For us, we play in big categories they're not going anywhere. But we insert a new format, a new like lifestyle into that category.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned, the creatine thing, I'd be really curious to hear your take. This kind of thing about the supplements you get online might not contain what you think they contain. It has become a thing. It's become a thing with Amazon in general. But it's really becoming a thing in the creatine gummy space. Like, hey, actually, when you test these gummies, they don't have what you'd expect in them. how have you responded to that or thought about that in terms of like, how do we give people confidence that it's not just like a placebo gummy that we're giving people, that this really is, trustworthy?
It's interesting. Creatine degrades really quickly in gummy form. So you might see a brand that clears NSF, has the required or stated nutrition labels dosage on it at production. But does that mean that we're eating it all fresh off the line, or are we eating it 3 months later or 6 months later off the line? Creatine degrades quickly. And so you'll see with stability testing, and I don't think any of these creatine brands do stability testing, i.e., how much creatine is in the product 6 months later or 9 months later. I would even argue, like, I haven't seen anybody talk about stability testing. I'll talk about it now. We do it. So what stability testing is...
I haven't heard of stability testing, so this is great.
So what stability testing is you're testing both immediately post-production to ensure, and you'll send it into Eurofins to ensure, did your product meet all of the label claims? The FDA requires that you, every batch, I think you rotate through the ingredients on it. You only have to test like 2 at a time. And so over the course of 10 to 20 batches, you're testing the whole the whole label, but you're not getting a comprehensive view on the batch altogether, unless you go send to Eurofins electively. So we'll send to Eurofins. Eurofins is a third-party lab that tests your product and ensures that it actually meets label claims, it's free of toxins, all the contaminants. What you'll see is with the creatine stuff that you brought up, Mike, they'll send all these brands into Eurofins. It's possible that some of those gummies are 4 months old, 6 months old, 1 month old. So there is some issue in there, and creatine especially degrades quickly. And so stability testing would be what we've done at Grüns, which is we'll test it immediately post-production. We've also tested the product 8 months post-production. Does the label claim, are we still meeting label claim 8 months post-production? And you can see it on our site. We've showed those COAs that we've gotten from Eurofins. But again, I don't think, especially in the gummy category, but also more broadly, I know, Mike, you buy supplements. I don't know if you do, Matt.
Oh, yeah. Well, my wife does, and I take them begrudgingly.
Yeah, but have you ever heard the stability testing thing before? Probably not, because you're probably taking pills and powders. And I actually don't know the stability of a powder, but in pills, it's encapsulated. I'm sure it really doesn't degrade. But gummy, that's a real thing. You have to make sure that the gummy meets label claims months later.
I've got a friend who's in supplements. We actually have a lot of friends in supplements on the show, but the stability thing in powders and pills, I think, is not talked about because it's just a given. I think there's an assumption that it's pretty stable, but I think that's a great call out on gummies. That's awesome.
The bummer to me about this space is it's a new consumer thing, and you've got a lot of bad actors in supplements, right? There are very few that I look at in the space, and obviously I'm not going to call out names, but it's just it's so tight. The people who are good people trying to do the right
supplements
thing.
Are shady. I mean, I graduated college in 1993, and I knew guys back in Arizona who were starting these supplement businesses, and they were shady. And it's that's a great selling point for Grüns, right? Having people understand your commitment to quality and the integrity of your business. And I very rarely use supplements, but I just recently started to looking at a couple. And I'm scared to buy anything. I seriously, I don't do a lot of research for a lot of purchases, but this one is I even tweeted about creatine supplements, because I'm if I'm going to do it, I might as well make sure that I'm happy to pay for the one that I know is going to be good. I will pay more for quality, for safety.
And, creatine's an interesting one, because I would say the powder, I was working out at the gym back in 2010 when it was the acidic, it tasted like battery acid, and I don't know what's changed since then, but
that's how you know it's working. Chad.
Yeah, exactly. It tasted so bad. But today you can get a powder that doesn't really have a taste. You can throw in a smoothie, your pre-workout, whatever it is. And so it's, that need state is, it's hard, people have asked, are we going to put creatine in a gummy? I think we'll have an interesting innovation that you'll see at some point, and it'll obviously have stability around it. But that's not why people buy Grüns. That's an important aspect. It gives you reassurance. People buy Grüns and our products because they're part of the lifestyle. right? Like it's fun for them. They get to share it with friends. Oh, by the way, it works. We did a clinical study. We do all this testing that makes it really official. But I just think the space is so, it's a lot of like weaponization of like, oh, I did this study. We're better than you. And I don't know. I don't think it's the right place to be in versus, kind of like what Dr. Squatch did, right? Like we're going to make it fun. We're going to relate to the consumer. And it's a good product, by the way. It's natural. But like this is the first time you're going to enjoy the shower.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're in a category that is experiencing real adoption and growth, the way that gummies, I'd say more generally, are. And obviously you guys have been a pioneer of that. One of the things that it brings is it brings the grifters, the kind of like, I'm going to just throw something up on TikTok. I'm going to drop ship. I'm going to try and, hit something easy and quick. And that unfortunately you've got to deal with that. When we were doing the Quibids thing, we had a competitor. He ran a website called Swipe Bids, and it was literally just stealing people's money. And for years we were like, this dude is like literally like he's not shipping product, he's just stealing people's money. And it took a couple of years, and it was literally a situation where he got arrested on the tarmac out of a private jet with $15 million in cash in a briefcase. It was like literally one of those stories. But when you're in a really high growth category, it's just going to be like bait, like a homing beacon for that type of personality. And unfortunately, you've got to educate people, and you've got to stand out. You got to deal with all that crap.
You might remember that Ridge switched to Richpanel about a year ago. Since then, our orders are climbing, yet support tickets aren't. Richpanel's self-service portal now lets 47% of our shoppers solve their own issues instantly. We used to answer every single ticket with a person. Now, that one change is on track to save us $500,000 in support salaries just this year. Our customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. It's above 96%. And we're doing that with less people, with more orders. AI is all the rage. E-com operators are finding ways to leverage AI and improve the revenue per employee. Ridge targets over $2 million per full-time employee, and Richpanel is helping us achieve that goal. Richpanel offers one of the most straightforward ways to leverage AI and improve your bottom line. Here's how Richpanel's AI is different from anything else out there. First, Richpanel spends the first 24 hours just learning your past conversations. Then it takes all that knowledge and creates self-guided service flows. There's no chatbots, there's no hallucinations. It is just exactly what your customers need to see and hear to solve their problems immediately after that first 24 hours. Our team saw the impact on day one. We're getting more tickets. They're being resolved faster, better, with a higher level of competency, and a higher level of satisfaction, all with less people on the team. So if you're serious about boosting revenue per employee and freeing agents to do higher value tasks, book a demo. Switching is painless. They do data migration. They train the staff. Everything's handled. It's a white glove service for operators listeners. Brands like Ridge, Jones Road, Pila, Lomi, they're all already switched, and they were live within 2 weeks. They guarantee 30% ticket reduction in the first 60 days or your money back. Think about that. You're going to get a bunch of customers coming to you. Q4 is just around the corner, and they guarantee 30% reduction in human tickets in the first 60 days. If that's interesting to you, go to richpanel.com/demo to book a demo. That's RICH panel.com/demo. Get started today. Thank you so much, Richpanel, for supporting the world's #1 e-commerce podcast and being on the greatest show on earth. Let's get back to it.
Hey, Chad, I'm curious, like the financing journey that you've had, and I know you guys are very private. I don't want you to mention numbers. I'm not asking you to mention the actual numbers, but like you've done a couple of raises, like you got this thing started. Like what did that look like? Because we know of a lot of people that want to be like you, right? And I want to be like you, but like the
I want to be like you, Jason. I'm trying my best to get to your scale.
Yeah, I want Chad's valuation 2 years in or 3 years in, whatever it is. How do I do that? Can you just tell me how to do that, Chad?
Clearly you had a great idea and you executed on it well. You have a great product. You know, there's a lot of trendiness around this space, and I think the jury is out on any business how sustainable it is long term. Right? We've had dozens of people tell us about HexClad. Like, can you really keep this up? Can you really keep this up? I don't think any of us know, but I think you have a good chance of keeping it up. But like, how did you get it to here from a financing perspective? Can you give us like a high level overview?
Yeah, of course. And I would say I see people trying to figure out the operations to produce our product. And I think what folks miss is it's not just a product. Like that's like one of the 20 things that's going right for us that make the LTV to CAC and the growth work. There's just like so much more to it. And I genuinely do feel a little bit bummed for these folks because they're going to dedicate years of their life. And there's already like 3 who have done it before, credible entrepreneurs who've tried to rip it and it didn't work for them. And so I don't know, like this is actually a really hard category. I don't think people who know when they look from the outside, they're like, oh man, they're doing so well. Like must be easy. Let me just go like figure out their operations and I'll do it myself. And it's not. There's a lot going on in this category to make it work. But yeah, to your question, Jason, people ask me like, what was that? I got the question like, how much of the growth of Grüns would you say is due to your experience as an investor and being on the board of all these awesome brands versus like Stanford? And the reality is like from a knowledge standpoint, Stanford's like 0.1%. Like I did not learn, there's like basically nothing in how I operate this business that I got from that MBA experience. However, I didn't grow up around wealth. And that early round that we raised to get off the ground came from friends and family. And my friends at Stanford's families. And so like, would we have a business today absent that experience and those friends putting their confidence in me? No, Grüns would not be here today if I didn't have that ability. So like, I'm happy to share, like we raised a little over 300,000 of cash to get the business started. Half of that went towards the initial PO. I'll tell you, my first command was like, we'll never see this guy again. It's a big PO, so we'll take it. And that's probably why they ended up doing the hand pack out, right? Because they were like, it's just a one-time thing.
Yeah, we're not buying machinery for this guy.
Don't worry about it. He'll be gone. We're just going to do this really quick on a table. And so, but basically every 6 months after that raised around. So like none of the VCs, the hardest part about consumer is none of these institutional investors, venture capitalists, none of them want to put money into a business that hasn't launched. Unless you're a celebrity, you've got some like interesting take, which I didn't have any of that, right? Like, in fact, I would say investors look at other investors and they're like, look, I know what my experience is as an investor. There's no way you could do this, right? And I do think my experience as an investor was different than theirs, but that doesn't matter. They have their perception. And so it was hard pre-launch to get any traction with VCs, but a week into launch, we were doing like $5,000 revenue days. And I literally emailed all these investors and said, hey, you've got a week to close on this. I'll let you into the round that I raised on friends and family, but we're closing. So if you want in, then you need to put in. And we got 1.25 million in like the second week of the business, third week of the business, which ran for another 6 months. Then we raised in February of 2024, I believe it was 6 million. And then in August, that was last year, August of 2024, we raised, and at that point we were break even. So this is more for like cash buffer and other needs. It wasn't like from a burn standpoint. We raised another, I believe it was 11 or 12. And then the most recent round that you all have seen in April, May of this year, the $35 million round.
But look, you had a lot of experience in this, right? And so you kind of knew how to get that quick raise done. You're like, this is the deal, guys. We're crushing it. Come in. That's well executed. That's not just the average entrepreneur probably couldn't do that. Couldn't execute that. Like execution is 50% of the battle when it comes to raising capital, right? I mean, let's just be honest about that.
It's so hard. It is so hard in this market to raise money. And, I feel fortunate that we've gone 4 for 4 on it. But it's not easy. And I'll tell you, this last round was particularly hard. I would say that our valuation is a really good valuation. The 500 million is a really good valuation for the recent investors. No, that's hard to believe. But looking at multiples, it's a really good valuation. And I think there's an important reason for that, right? We need to leave upside for whatever the future looks like, whether it's a strategic, whether it's an IPO, those people need to make their return. And so we intentionally took a valuation lower than what I think we're worth to leave that upside.
Man, I just want to stop there and say this is one of the things that is somewhat counterintuitive about how really successful people think. They intentionally think about how to help other people win. And that's part of the reason that they win. Less moderately successful people, I think, tend to only think about how do I maximize my outcome? And I'm going to constantly just focus on maximizing my outcome. And so they never hit the real home runs, because the way you hit the grand slams, I'm convinced, is primarily by not just winning yourself, but by helping a halo of people around you win. And that's a great illustration of it. You're actually thinking about not how do I get the maximum valuation here, or, the most money for the least amount of equity, but how do I actually make sure that the investors who are involved in this round crush it. And that's going to lead to opportunities in the future that you don't know about. I mean, we're sitting here, we don't know what those would be, ways that that's going to come back to you, but it will. It sounds like your plan, Chad, is that this is probably the last round that you do, that in the future, like there's probably.
We're nicely profitable. We don't need additional cash for anything. I'll tell you one thing that I probably should have mentioned that matters a lot to me is I think the debate around whether to raise or not usually focuses on like, oh, you're like the VCs now have control and they're going to like tell you what to do and you need to hit these targets. And, we're growing really fast. So like, that's not really a concern from like, we need to like put out numbers and we're nicely profitable. But what I would say is I tell anybody who comes to me and asks whether they should raise is if somebody wants to give you money, take it. Unless you're giving up voting control. Unless you're giving up control of the destiny of the business, then don't take it. So like, again, you see one headline in this recent round of 500 million. Deal terms on that, super clean. People don't necessarily see that part. Whereas I can tell you a competitor of ours back in 2022 raised at a $1.1 billion valuation. Ridiculous.
Yeah, nobody understands that top line number means almost nothing.
We talked about that on the last pod. We talked about different kind of, I don't know if that launched today, like structured deal. So your deal, that deal didn't have a lot of structure, Chad?
No, I mean, I was super clear from the start. I was like, we don't need to do this round. And so if we're doing a round, like we want a good partner who's going to help us strategically scale. And two, it's going to be clean. It's going to be like a one-time lick breath.
Well, and when you don't try and get super aggressive on the valuation side, it's easier to do that as well. That's another reason why you don't try and get every penny on the valuation side, because there's always going to come with strings attached on the liquidation preferences or, board seats or a whole bunch of other things. So, but it still is interesting to me. I mean, you guys are profitable. Do you actually have like a line of sight to how you're going to use that money? Or is it more just like somebody wants to give me a whole bunch of money, I might as well put it on the balance sheet?
No, I mean, there was always intent with every single round we raised. Historically, in the first couple rounds, it was back to what I was sharing with Matt here is the, if the world lets me capture a certain amount of new customers in a month, we're going to be unprofitable. And so we were funding some of that unprofitability from a P&L standpoint, but not unprofitable LTV to CAC economics. Now that the business has scaled, I would say there's two reasons to raise. Number one is, if you've got $1 million of cash in the bank and a $10 million revenue business, that feels comfortable.
Yeah.
But if you're running at break even and now you're doing 50 million of revenue with 1 million of cash in the bank, that's not good. You should cushion that up. And the way to cushion that is either slow down growth or put some more money on the balance sheet to create that buffer. I would say that's more of like what we were doing, last year. Now it's, we're funding massive growth in retail, net cash flow terms of 60 days. You gotta finance that somehow. We're building out this facility in Dallas. So there's like real cash needs that don't sit on the P&L. They sit on, cash flow statement or other areas where we need to create some cash cushion.
Something you said, Chad, that I think is important for founders on the investor side is, and I got this advice from a guy in the Bay Area years ago when we were raising money, because I was always scared of control, right? It's like, well, what if they get control? How much equity do I own? And this guy who had sold his company for $3.5 billion, he was like, oh, no, you don't understand. You as the entrepreneur always have control. He's He's like, there's no venture investor that's showing up to run your company. None. He's like, at very late stages, like in the many, many billions, like the Instacart situation, you hear these war stories of like hostile investors that kick founders out. I mean, reality is anybody listening to this show, like most people aren't going to be in that seat. So even the voting control thing is actually a great call. But like this idea that you own less than, say, like half of the company at some point and that you lost control. No, you didn't.
There's the profits interest and how much of the profits interest you have and how is the board structured. And
Totally. Very different things.
It is counterintuitive to people. Like I know a founder who owns 75% of his business. He doesn't really control the board. It's 5 people. And he's one, and I would say it's a friendly board, so it doesn't matter, and the business is doing well. But I've kind of privately told him, like, the moment that you feel like you can, you should change the structure, because if things did go really badly, you are actually vulnerable here in a way, and it's one of those things that, like, the way your board is structured, it's not a big deal until it's a huge deal. And then
Chip Wilson's talked about this. His Lululemon story, like he's been pretty public that board control ultimately bit him in the end.
I don't think I would want to run a company where I did not know that I controlled the board. And there's other people that can do it. I think it's a different mindset to be able to do that. But when you're in that situation, you just need to know that now a significant portion of your mind share needs to go towards optics and towards politics, because there are now people that can vote you out of your seat and you have to manage perceptions. Whereas, when you're in a position where you have the board control, you don't have to worry as much about perception, and you can run the business the way that you think's best.
Yeah, it's a great call out.
It's interesting. I had less than 50% of Simple Modern, but I was like, I actually put in a provision. I don't think I've heard of anybody doing this, because I had 2 co-founders, but the provision I put in was that I had 50% exactly of the voting interest. And it was kind of symbolic in that I'm like, I don't need to know that I have control. I need to know that I can block anything that I think is antithetical. So it's even like there's a spectrum of, like, it's not like you need to be authoritarian or you need to, like, be able to control everything. But if you can't stop things that you think are kind of against what the company's intended to be, or, your removal or something else. And my thought was always, like, the thing I liked about 50%, which like I said, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody intentionally, voluntarily doing this, was that it put me in a position where I knew I had to convince at least one other person to see things my way. And if I couldn't convince at least one other person, then probably I should, look inward about, like, well, why is that? But I just couldn't have anything crammed down my throat.
It's so critical, but it's hard. You got to leverage like a lawyer or legal counsel to help you with that, because there's so many terms that if you're not in the investing world, you're not going to pick up on.
Well, it's totally asymmetric, and you know this, Chad, but, like, if you go and raise a round, you're doing it for the first, second, third time, maybe, right? This is their 50th. This is their 100th or whatever. And so, like, you're going to get waxed in that transaction in terms of, like, just the information asymmetry is really big. So you have to walk in knowing that. And there's some great books about, like, kind of bringing yourself up to speed on some of the basics. But then, kind of to your point, Chad, you really want advisors. If you're going to take money from anybody, you really want advisors that have done it before, that are helping you, like, look over the terms, because you can very easily make a bed that you don't really want to sleep in.
Jason, what do you like about Saras? You were gone for the past week in Italy. Were you checking Saras dashboards?
I wasn't checking anything in Italy, but I will say this, like, whenever anyone on my teams, like growth team or anywhere else, like, sends me data anymore, it's likely coming out of Saras. And every once in a while, I'll get something from them and it looks really slick. And I'm like, where'd you get that? Is that Saras? And like, yeah. And I always feel really good about our investment. I do get a daily email of some metrics out of Saras that comes through. But one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is AI. Duh, right? Everyone is. Duh. But, like, I finally woke up a few weeks ago. I was like, I got to get serious about this. And I was actually talking to the Saras guys, and they launched the next generation AI powered stuff in their platform, which I'm excited about. It's Saras IQ. It's invite only right now. If you mention Operators Podcast, you can probably get access, hopefully. But the next level of all of this is first with AI, you need to have all of your data somewhere. I mean, it's going to be really messy to just drop stuff into different AI platforms. If you have your data in one place, and then you can really leverage AI. So the way I've thought about our investment in Saras Analytics was getting all of our data in one place, understanding our customers better, understanding our marketing metrics better, but then being able to layer AI on top of that is, I think, the really exciting next level here.
You brought up bringing in Costco, Amazon, and Shopify. The ability to have all sales channels with the same data is so important. If you're listening to this and you sell on Amazon, you know how painful that platform is. You have to wait like a couple extra days to pull your reports. Like the SKUs aren't the same as the rest of your SKUs. Like the titles are different. So like to get actually like clean data to compare, it's very manual. Using Saras Analytics, they matched all that up for us. So like they cleaned all that data. So I can actually look at what is the true margin profile of an Amazon sale. What's Amazon return rate? What's Amazon customer frequency? Like all the type of data compared to our .com and have like a comprehensive overview. And now with their new AI tool, I don't have to look at it. I could just ask it. It could just tell me cool questions. So doing that across our 5 Shopify stores as well. We have an EU Shopify store. So now I can compare EU Ring customer cohorts versus Canadian Ring customer cohorts versus Amazon Ring customer cohorts. So now we're getting to different functions of my business across different channels, different categories, and actually looking at the margin, the repeat rate, and like, is it worth investing in these different things? So if your business starts to feel like a spider web and just like keeps going and going and going, it's just like this nonstop proliferation of different channels, maybe it's time to check something out like Saras Analytics.
I remember, Sean, at the very beginning, this is a very typical Sean thing. Sean was like, what is this? Why do I need this? Right. And I'm actually really happy that you come to understand like how important having a data warehouse is and what it does for managing your business, because you were not like a true believer from the beginning.
No, I was angry when you told me I needed to pay for something new, but Jason was right. He convinced me. He got me on board. I'm using it. So a rare Jason W. So thank you,
Exactly.
Jason.
Rare.
I'm on Saras Analytics. He's on Saras Analytics. Proud sponsor of the Operators Podcast. So if you want a data warehouse and you want an AI powered data warehouse, tell Saras about the Saras IQ feature, and then you crave it. You're demanding you get access to it. So, all right, guys. Talk to you later.
Hey, Chad, let me ask this question. We're kind of getting to the end. What's one thing that you learned through the experience of scaling so far that surprised you, or what's one of the ways that you've grown that you wouldn't have anticipated?
Team. It's not lip service. You'll see me saying it everywhere. I think some people read that and they're like, oh, he's just like saying it. No, like no good brand, long-term, long-standing brand is built off of 5 to 10 people.
No.
Period. And there's so much hype in the D2C community around, well, how efficient are you? I can almost guarantee you that our payroll and external agency fees lumped together as a % of revenue is lower than anybody else. We've almost got 100 people on our team. We're basically all in-house. That should be the measure of efficiency. And I think everybody gets so hell-bent around, like you see it everywhere. It's like, oh my goodness, this brand's doing blank and they got two full-time people. I'm like, that sounds like, to me, somebody who doesn't know how to lead, who doesn't know how to manage, doesn't know how to build a team, can't find the right people. And they'd rather lean in on this moment of time where we're all hyping up how great they are, that they just use like 20 agencies. And so what I've learned, and it's funny, I would probably put myself in that category. I was pitching back in February of 2024 that I could get this thing to 100 million of revenue with 4 employees. And my chief of staff at the time, Katie, she's now president of Grüns, promoted her about 6 months in. She's phenomenal. She made a comment to me like a month into her role. It was like May. She was like, hey, I think we need to like hire people. I was like, I don't know. And she's like laid it out for me. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And then that's spurred what we've done here, where we've brought so much in-house and we have a really good hiring function and good culture. But like I need somebody to wake me up to that. And I think there's levels where people start to realize it at like 20 million of revenue. They're like, we're just not going to build this. I'd be curious if anybody could point me to one single brand that's doing over 100 million of revenue sustainably, planning to grow for the long term, that has like 5 people.
No, you're moving physical things around the world. No.
I think there's smaller teams. You can do it with a smaller footprint than you used to. We had Will from IQ
For
Bar.
sure.
He's doing it with a pretty tight group. But
It's a good example.
But to your point, like there's some uniqueness that makes that possible. I think consumer, where you're in really big channels, and maybe if you're not doing like tons and tons of R&D, like there's ways to make it work. But generally, like we just get way too hand wavy about how important team is. And I think at the end of the day, business is primarily about organizing human capital. I'm convinced. I think people focus a lot more on the other aspects, the financial capital and the other stuff. To me, like financial capital is mostly a commodity. You got a lot of people offering it. There's not a lot of differentiation, but human capital is a massive piece of success. And if you're superior at being able to gather and organize human capital, you're inevitably going to be successful.
Organize is the really important part there. I think, you know, you might ask, now that we have all these wonderful humans here at Grüns, like, what do I do? I see my job is set the vision, make sure that everybody's very clear on what's going to drive growth. And 2, I set the connected web. I'm the one that needs to ensure that communication patterns and streets, avenues in the company are very clear, so that we function correctly all together. And that's not easy to do, right? Like it's actually kind of hard to do that stuff, and it's a completely different skill set than when Jordan, she does influencer here at Grüns. She was employee number 1 back in October of 2023, when she and I were the only 2 running it for 6 months. Right? Like I did a lot of different stuff back then that I don't do anything with. I was telling the team, like I used to look at Shopify 20 times a day, like the Shopify admin. I look at it like 3 times a month now, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a completely different world.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've actually kind of realized that there's a negative correlation between how often I'm checking our numbers and how well I'm doing in leading people. Typically, like the more I'm in spreadsheets and the more I'm looking at dashboards, because they're just very different parts of my brain. Well, hey, Chad, this is awesome, man. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on all the success. It's really fun when you see such a successful product that's great for people, but then also you see like just excellence in operating. And so we admire what you've done there and know that you're going to be continuing to scale and do great things, but really appreciate you, especially with a culture where, like you said, you are externally opaque. Really appreciate you being willing to share some of your insights from running the company. This is invaluable. So thanks for being on the pod, man.
Appreciate you guys having me. It's looking forward to giving back more. We're in that period of externally opaque, but I think you'll see me trying to share out more. I have no desire to be an influencer. If you look me up on YouTube, my wife and I did that for a year and actually built a pretty good YouTube following. This is for no other purpose than to help people, help them improve their business. So I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me have the chance to do that.
That's awesome. All right, guys, that's the pod.
All right, thanks for making it all the way to the end of this episode. Wherever you are in the world, it is awesome to have you here. If you do not already subscribe to this show, that is my one ask, is please go to whatever platform you are watching or listening to this on. It could be YouTube, it could be Spotify, Apple, I don't care. Just go hit the subscribe button. Please pump our egos up. It helps. And before we go, one more thank you to the sponsors, Fulfil, Postscript, Northbeam, Saras, and Richpanel. Awesome guys running these companies. We all use them. These are our vendors. That's the only reason they're sponsors of the show. So thanks again to those people.